In today's video, I think I'm going to be doing a bit of a sit and chat with you guys. I haven't done that in a really long time. A lot of what I'm about to talk about today is mostly anecdotal, other than giving you some medical context for what we are going to be talking about today and how it relates to my situation and possibly yours if you do find that you struggle with this. And you probably already can tell by the video what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get into that, I realize I haven't introduced myself. I'm Ren Taler. I mainly make videos about reading, writing, and recently I've been experimenting with some commentary videos. I also have ADHD, which is very pertinent to what we're going to be talking about today. All of my social media will be linked down below. I'm at Ren Taler on everything. Anyway, in today's video, I really wanted to talk about ADHD and how it relates to reading, which you think in some cases it would be talked about more with the rise of the ADHD community and people just being more willing to talk about that along with other disorders like autism spectrum disorder and things like that. But I feel like in relation to reading and book talk and communities like that, no one has, to my knowledge anyway, addressed what having ADHD specifically could mean for someone who reads for a hobby and how it kind of can affect you just in ways that I feel like I didn't even really comprehend up until recently. I am 24 years old. I didn't get a diagnosis till last year when I was 23 in the summer. And so I didn't realize how much this disorder affected my ability to read, which is great because I am a creative writing and publishing major. So I quite literally have to read and write for school. I'm also trying to start my own business, which will be an indie publishing brand where I'll publish my books along with other indie authors. It'll hopefully be more of a trad publishing situation, but to start out, we're probably going to be offering more freelance services to people who want to self-publish their own books and then have their own thing going on as far as maybe publishing under their own name. I know that for that purpose, I have to be good and fast at reading. And when it comes to doing so in my personal life, I get burnt out because for 8 or so months out of the year, now almost 12 because I'm doing summer school, I have to read and write for school constantly, which welcome to undergrad life. But I feel like when your major is focused on, in this case, the English language, but the publishing industry as a whole and everything in between when it comes to writing and reading books, that's literally my entire life right now. And when you take into account what having ADHD means and what it entails, it makes the burnout that much more extensive. But after talking to some of my classmates over the past 2 years, I've noticed that everyone kind of feels that way. I don't know if every single one of those people has ADHD specifically or something else, but it's clear that regardless of where you are kind of coming from in that circumstance, you will probably end up with some negative feeling towards reading and writing. To get into more how it relates to what we're doing here, like why I'm on Book Talk and BookTube in this case, and how that also affects my YouTube channel because I'm not reading as much as I would like. And it's hard when you've centered your channel around reading and you're not reading it. There's nothing to post. So I think that's also why I've been expanding into commentary videos. I've talked about how I'm a creative writing and publishing major, but I haven't really talked about what ADHD is and what it entails. Though I feel like for the most part, the general public knows what that disorder is and what it means to have it. But just to give you a quick rundown, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It is characterized as a neurodevelopmental disorder, which can affect many parts of a person's life, such as their social abilities, energy, also financial stability, which is mainly what I'm trying to get at today because buying books is expensive. It's so expensive to be a reader, but we're going to get into like prices and stuff in a little bit. But this topic kind of plays into what I talked about in my previous video, I think 2 videos ago, about overconsumption on Book Talk and how that has been a real conversation, an ongoing conversation over the past few months, if not year, I think. I've seen videos pop up all over YouTube and the commentary space talking about BookTube or Book Talk specifically, and how it has just kind of gotten out of hand, the amount of people who post book hauls and talk about all the books they buy and going to bookstores. But it's not that I don't enjoy those videos. I love watching videos of people going to bookstores and buying books and doing book hauls. Ever since I've been on BookTube for almost a decade now, that's kind of always been the main staple of BookTube, I feel, at least book hauls. Because even though the structure of the video is the same, if you are buying new books, you always have something new to talk about. And that's also been a topic of conversation, which is, you know, the types of videos you can make on BookTube are rather limiting sometimes. Talking about the same things over and over again can get pretty tiring, both as a viewer and as a creator. So when you buy new books constantly, or you're constantly going to a bookstore, you have something new to talk about, which is a trap that I'm trying not to fall into as a mainly BookTube creator. But when it comes to other things I want to talk about, like my writing, I know as a creator, those don't get as many views. So why would I want to make videos about that? As I was saying, being a reader is really expensive, especially in Canada, where a paperback typically costs $25.99 Canadian. And that's just a paperback. That's usually like adult romance paperbacks. And that doesn't even include taxes, because here we only add on taxes after the fact. So you think, oh, I'm going to get this book for $26 essentially. And then you go to checkout and it's like, jokes, it's more like $30. And it sucks a lot. With books being that expensive, getting 4 of them could cost you just over $100. Only 4 books. Okay. That's why I recently have turned to Book Outlet, which not sponsored, by the way, but I love that company. And the amount of books I can get for like less than $100 Canadian is insane compared to what I have to pay at regular priced bookstores, both big chain and otherwise. But I am usually more willing to buy from small bookstores at full price because they tend to offer pretty decent discounts for the most part. A criticism of Book Talk specifically is the promotion of buying books long before one finishes the laundry list of books that they want to read and probably already have in their possession to begin with. I am for sure guilty of this, but I am somewhat aware of this issue that I have, enough to make this video at least. For me, the idea of buying a new book, a new story or world to escape to essentially is hard to resist. At least once a week, I have this conversation with my fiance about going to the bookstore when I clearly don't need to, but I do anyways. You could almost say that it gives me a little bit of a dopamine boost. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that helps with completing tasks and essentially gives you the motivation to do things and generally makes you not depressed. People with ADHD have been found to lack in producing it or enough at the level that someone who doesn't have it would, which can make something as simple as taking a shower feel like you want to die, which may sound dramatic, but that's kind of the point though, is that something that should be simple like that can sometimes take forever to do. Because not to be too TMI, I don't think this is that bad of a thing to say or mention in a video like this, but when you know finishing a task will make you feel better, make you feel good once it's done, it doesn't have to even be a shower, but something like doing the dishes, any sort of chore really, because also taking a shower sometimes admittedly feels like a chore. It just feels like the hardest thing to do in the world. And in this case, dopamine elevates in production when we do things that we like. And for readers like myself, that's buying books considering that we, have a deficit in attention, some of us may struggle with finishing a book from time to time. So in my personal experience, I will start off loving a book that I just started. Then usually around the 100-page mark, I get bored and I just want to read something else. So I move on to the next book that catches my attention. I feel like it's also worth mentioning that reading and buying books are two completely separate hobbies. Obviously they overlap, but I have so many special editions of books that I have, some of which I have not read. This sounds so bad, but I actually have 4 copies of Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. I have not read that book, but somehow over the past few months, I have managed to acquire 3 signed copies. So 3 out of the 4 copies that I own are signed, and they are special. 2 actually are special editions. But collecting books that look pretty and that I know I want to read, and if I end up not liking them, I can always give them away to somebody else, either for money or to a friend that actually has liked the book. But just simply looking at it makes me happy. I don't know what the science is behind that, other than, it giving me that dopamine boost that I constantly crave. But, buying, receiving books, going to the bookstore and just looking at them, that's what gives me that dopamine boost. There are other ways to buy books other than physically walking into a bookstore. Obviously you have Amazon, but personally walking into a bookstore is what gives me that boost that I'm looking for. You can buy stuff off of Amazon, and aside from any ethical, immoral concerns that you have with that company, it's not the same as going into a space where there are other people who have the same interests as you. And this is what I like about going to smaller bookstores, is sometimes you end up having more conversation with the bookstore owners or workers about the books that you're buying. A lot of the time, there's this one bookstore that's kind of within walking distance of where I live. And when I go to it, the owner of the bookstore knows who I am, remembers me, and she remembered who I was after just one visit. And I hadn't seen her in months after visiting the store the first time. And this owner recognized me. I don't think she remembered my name or anything, but this person remembered my face at least and knew, I know you've been here before. And that was really cool. And all of that combined just makes for the perfect cocktail, if you will, of dopamine boosting. I will say though that I will turn to Amazon in moments of weakness when I really just need that quick fix. But of course, when it comes to anything like that, it doesn't really last. Eventually the book is going to get here. I'm going to look at it. I'll get the fix that I need, and then I want to buy a new book anyway. People with ADHD in general have been known to have poor financial planning and spending habits. I'm lucky at this point because the thing that I'm spending most of my money on is books. Now, with the wedding coming up, a lot of the other things I'm spending my money on these days are for that, but I can still say these purchases are somewhat necessary, if not more justifiable, because there will come a point where I won't be spending my money on wedding related things anymore because, I'll be married and the wedding will have happened at some point. And it's kind of a joke at this point, also because I have heard tons of people within the community saying things like, at least it's not drugs or something, which I wholeheartedly believe, by the way. At least it's not something that could legitimately kill me if I have too much of it, unless I just have a bookshelf fall on top of me and then I get suffocated by all the books that fall on me, or, I get hit in the head with a 1,000-page tome that I have for some reason. And for me personally, because my major, as I said earlier in this video, is quite literally involving the study of books, writing, and the publishing industry as a whole, it makes the purchasing of books and reading less of a hobby and more of a necessity in some cases, especially when I have to buy a book for school. If you are someone who isn't in that position, you aren't an English or creative writing major, but buying books still makes you happy, obviously don't take my word as gospel, but if that's your thing, lean into it, Don't put yourself into debt over that though. But if you were going to put yourself in debt over anything, it might as well be books. That is probably the worst advice I could ever possibly give to somebody, but truly, I'd rather be addicted to buying books than something else. And as I said earlier, I'm also working on putting together my own publishing company. I want to offer freelance services to start for indie published authors or people who aspire to be that. But then eventually I want to transition into a trad publishing model. But that also involves, separately from my schooling, studying the publishing industry and also understanding it from a business perspective. And doing so requires consuming bookish content on the regular and understanding how marketing works, how the tropification, essentially, of marketing books has changed the landscape of publishing, not just the marketing part, but also the books themselves. Because I think if you're in the space, you would know that that's just how things have been going lately. When someone is advertising a book, they will have enemies to lovers, like a picture of the book cover with the different tropes and arrows pointing to the book. If I can find an example, I'll put it on the screen now. Sometimes even just consuming the content of tropes that people like, understanding trends, how to market books, but also reading the books that go viral and understanding the trends and how they evolve into more and into the things that people will automatically gravitate towards. There's also the self-esteem aspect of it. So seeing people, for me personally, read 10 plus books a month, sometimes in a week, or at least it feels that way sometimes, is disheartening, to say the least. Not because reading that much is bad. It isn't at all. But as someone who is more willing these days to DNF a book, I don't get through books that quickly compared to those people who are reading all those books in a week. I swear I've seen a video of this one woman reading like around that much in a week. And I don't know how people do it. But like I said earlier, if a book isn't interesting me anymore, I stop reading. I'm not going to put myself through it. Sometimes most of the time, I would say, it's not even the fault of the author, which is almost more sad somehow. I don't know. It's not the fault of the author or the writing or the plot. It's just how I feel about that book at that point in time. The sudden lack of interest will take over and I won't want to read that type of story anymore. It's just kind of a fact of life. It happens. If something doesn't hold my attention, I will find it immediately hard to continue. That goes for all tasks that don't interest me. But in relation to books, I could start out loving what I am reading. But eventually, if, certain events don't happen when I feel like they should, then ultimately I will not just put the book down, but feel immense guilt for stopping like that. One of the best examples I can think of when it came to this recently anyway, is this one book. I don't want to even say what it is because I don't want to offend anybody, but it was this fantasy novel where it started out as, or it's supposed to start out as enemies to lovers. But 100 pages in, the main couple hadn't even really interacted all that much. I found that the author really liked to do a lot of flashbacks or talking about like how they interacted in the past. But in current time, 100 pages in, they barely spoke to each other. And I just wasn't vibing with that. Now that I'm explaining it out loud, it seems more justifiable than it did in my head. And I know there's nothing really to feel guilty about, but I still feel like that regardless. And the author, the publisher, they already have my money. Assuming I don't put my opinion out there and I don't specifically say what book it was, they will never know or even care what a random person on the internet has to say about their product or their work. It doesn't matter. And my mom used to joke with me as a kid that I would start reading a book and just move on to the next one because I know she's the type of person and we have the same reading taste pretty much. She loves fantasy probably more than I do at this point, if I'm being completely honest. I have been reading a lot more. I read a memoir recently, which is kind of random because normally I'm not a memoir, nonfiction-y kind of person. But I've really been gearing more towards like hockey romance. I know, but it's right now, it's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. Not that I should feel guilty about it, but it's there. I like it. Don't kill me. Yeah, she's the type of person who has to finish a book when she started it and will not DNF for the life of her. And I kind of admire that, but I also feel bad because why would you put yourself through something that you obviously don't like? I think a part of it too is when you've paid for the book, like you spent your money on that book. You don't want to not read it because then it almost feels like a waste of money. But then I'd rather waste my money than my time because like, not that I'm returning books immediately if I don't like them. I don't think I've ever returned a book in my entire life unless I ordered a physical copy of one to my house and it came damaged. I've gotten refunds maybe for that, but I don't go out of my way to get a refund on a book otherwise. So, I'd rather quote unquote waste my money on a book than my time. I think my time is a little more valuable than my money, at least when it comes to stuff like this. The only other time I will put myself through reading a book if I don't like it is if it's one in the series, like, if it's the second or third book, because if it's something that I've been enjoying up until that point, I will want to see it through. I was going to say, I feel like when it comes to trilogies, especially, I'm always worried about the middle book slump, which is funny because one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors of all time, Leigh Bardugo, one of my favorite books that she has ever written is the second book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which to my knowledge is the one that people tend to like the least. But for some reason, that book was my favorite. I don't know why. I think because of Nikolai, if I'm being completely honest with you. Or I will, if it's like a duology too, I will probably push through it and just read it because it's not the first book. So that's where my rules kind of differ a little bit. All of this is to say is that it does become a bit of a vicious cycle where I stop liking the books I have attempted to read. But instead of going for the books that I already have, but have not read yet, I want the experience and the dopamine boost that comes from going physically to a bookstore and buying tons of books that I probably won't get to for a really long time, if I get to them at all. And I've ended up spending so much money on books that it's not embarrassing. I'm clearly putting this out on the internet because I can, but it's just something. It's just something that I've done. And, if I'm going to be financially irresponsible over anything, it might as well be books. And I'm half joking. I'm at the point now where I've started to sort of, what's the word? This means something. This means slowing down, I guess, stopping the cycle. I don't think I'll ever be able to stop the cycle per se, but I can slow it down. But anyway, I think my camera is about to die. So I'm going to end this with, in no way am I saying that you automatically have ADHD if you do these things too. But for me, I can tell that this is the reason. This is the reason why I spend my money this way. This is the reason why I spend all my money on books. Not all of it, but most of it. It's just my life at this point. But anyway, I'm going to end the video here. Make sure to like, subscribe, and do whatever the hell you want in life. Make sure to click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified anytime that I post. Hope you have a great day and or night whenever you're watching this. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.